course, there are a lot of humanitarian decisions surrounding the current fleeing of these refugees from Syria who are trying to seek a life in Europe. So there's the humanitarian question, but there's also the economic implications of a large influx of population whenever it happens. So give us the benefit of your insight into what Europe is experiencing at the moment.
Well, I mean, to this magnitude, Europe has, well, the last big crisis we had were the Balkan Wars, and particularly Germany and Austria received a very large number of refugees. Now, this crisis is likely to be larger in magnitude and is very challenging for European institutions. So we have to address a very serious resource problem, which we are seeing particularly now in the Mediterranean countries, which are the first stage of the journey of these refugees, but also in countries like Germany, Austria, which at the moment are receiving the vast majority of refugees. Resources have to be made available, and we see very large efforts in this direction.
From an economics point of view, should we be welcoming these people? Just from a purely economics point of view, what does your research tell you about what they will add or subtract from the economic story here in Europe?
Well, that's very difficult to say. We have not analyzed data on refugees, in particular not to that magnitude.
Yep.
And the economic impact will always depend on the particular composition of the immigrant inflow. Now, it is very likely that what we are seeing at the moment are individuals who are well trained, they are young, they are skilled, and if they at some point enter the labor markets of some of the northern European countries, then it is likely that they will make a contribution. But it's very difficult to talk about that at a stage where we don't even know really who are those people who are arriving.
It seems that Germany is out in front here from a European perspective, certainly in terms of the numbers that they've been talking about accepting, and also in their encouragement to other European countries to do the same. They clearly have their own humanitarian concerns, but what is likely to be any kind of economic impact of the arrival of the size of influx that we're talking about here?
Well, so far we don't really know how many people will have arrived at the end of the year. There are some very large estimates of Germany accepting up to 800,000 asylum seekers. Not everybody will be granted asylum, but then Germany is a very big country. It has an economy which is flourishing. It has an aging population, which kind of is an issue in itself, a problem in itself, and a large number of young, hopefully well-educated immigrants is not something which is necessarily harmful. I would rather think very much the opposite.
Your research, I was interested to read your research. I remember reading it at the time, talking about the impact in the UK and the fact that arrivals from the EU tended to contribute more than arrivals from outside the EU, which had a negative effect. Is the nature of your arrival into a country significant in the economic contribution that you're going to make? I.e., if you're coming to the UK from the EU, you don't tend to have the same barriers, i.e., when your employer looks at you, he can just employ you straight away, etc., etc. So does it matter the nature of your arrival? Does that have a meaningful long-term impact?
Well, of course. If you want to be productive in the UK or in any other European country, you have to have the skills which are needed in that country. And one important skill, of course, is language. You can be a trained surgeon. If you don't speak the English language, you will be not very useful to the NHS. And the same is true with many other professions. So language and many skills which are very specific to the labor market of the country where immigrants arrive are very important to turn their productivity into productivity which is useful for that country. So that will be clearly a challenge, in particular for countries which speak languages which are other than English, in particular Germany. It's unlikely that a very large part of the Syrian refugees who are arriving in Germany at the moment speak the German language. But there is a big effort to train them in language centers, to make them in that way more useful for the German labor market. So clearly the composition, the skills and the skill set of immigrants are very important to assess their economic benefits to the country which receives them.
It seems as if the Schengen arrangement, the Schengen visa scheme, is under the microscope at the moment as a result of this falling out over over migration. Do you think that Schengen lives on through this? How does this crisis affect that Schengen agreement?
Well, Schengen is a wonderful arrangement. It has decreased transaction costs of traveling across borders quite dramatically. And it's the first challenge for that particular arrangement. I don't think that it will go down with this crisis. I think it will live on. But clearly we will have to adjust every institution to new challenges, and Schengen doesn't make a difference in that respect.
Peter, can I just ask you a question as you sat and listened to this? What has been interesting has been watching the financial markets over the last month or so obsess about China. And that has been the main focus of the financial markets. The migration crisis story in Europe seems to have had very little resonance in the financial markets. Does that surprise you?
It does a little bit. I think there's two issues that come into sort of play in my mind. Number one is the potential spending on governments in Europe on this situation. Yeah. You know, one thing that we've seen in the last GDP reads was that government spending in Europe has decreased. And this could be one of those, situations where you could get a significant stimulus boost by 120,000 refugees and the cost of integrating them into society. And I think that's something that the market is not particularly pricing in. That could be a significant stimulus. And I was going to ask our guest host what he thought about the size of the spending. And number two is, as you said, it's the idea of Shenzhen and allowing this effortless crossing, I think, is a real tension point for EU members. And this, I think, only exacerbates the concern of how much how much co-integration should there be for Europe. And I think going in, when you're talking about Greek exit and Brexit, these are one of the primary reasons that those countries are looking to sort of, well, not so much Greek, but Britain is looking to separate them from the EU. So I think it increases the possibility of Brexit.
Peter, just sorry, Professor. The cost of this is. Do you, as your research, can you throw up any numbers for us? Do you know how much it? You talked about the German efforts to improve language skills. How much money will Europe have to spend? You've obviously going to caveat this very heavily because we don't know who these people are. But kind of, did the Balkans give us any idea, any history, any kind of comparable figures?
I mean, I think on the large scale of monies on the budgets our governments are having, this is really pretty insignificant. On the other hand, the potential benefits of having well-educated people who are will integrate well into our labor markets are quite substantial. In particular, as I said earlier, for countries, and many of European countries are in that situation with decreasing population. So I don't see that in the longer run as an economic burden. I see it actually as an economic opportunity.